Hey everybody, and welcome to a Traveling Goof Overpower video. Today we're going to be talking about the OP Cup, a legacy tournament that was just held in Columbus, Ohio. And as you can tell, this is already different than my last videos have been. I put the Poseidon mat away, and instead we're going to be doing this on the computer screen, so I hope it goes well. Before we start, I want to send my thanks out to Zach V. All the data that I'm going to be presenting today is all coming from his list that he posts Facebook and Discord earlier. So thanks, Zach, for taking the time to put that all together. All right, so let's take a look at what we got. So I'm going to start off. I took all this data that Zach put together with all the different characters, their battle sites, their home bases, their mission sets, and I put it all into Excel. And one of the things that I was really interested in looking at was to see what sets were being represented. So I broke this out by the 3-stat overpower characters from Marvel. I broke it out into the 4-stat, which I call the IQ, and then I broke it into DC, Image, and then finally LRG. And then I also tallied up all the battle sites, home bases, and mission sets, but we'll get into that stuff later. So first thing that I want to note was that LRG was pretty well represented, actually. I was pretty happy about that, since that's the stuff that I'm pretty familiar with these days. I broke this out here, and you'll notice that 23.84% of all the characters in those 43 decks were made up of LRG characters. And that's really cool. Almost a quarter of everything seen was brand new. That beat out DC, Image, and Marvel Overpower by quite a bit. But as expected, the Marvel 4-stat characters definitely led the way here with 60.47% representation. But let's not get too distracted right away. Who was actually played? What characters showed up? So I'm going to break this out by the most heavily seen characters first. The most frequently seen character in the OP Cup was none other than Spawn, with 11 different decks with him in it. Yikes. It's 11 out of 43 decks. Pretty much a quarter of everyone that we've seen. So let's take a look at who else made the list. So we had Spawn with 11, but then Scarlet Witch showed up with 10, Doctor Strange 9, Silver Sable and X-Babies were tied for 7. And then we had Spider-Woman, Beast the Brute, Mr. Fantastic, and Zeus all had 6 characters. So that was actually really cool that one of the LRG characters, Zeus, was so prevalent. I don't actually like these top 5 characters. Why? Because number 1, 2, and 3 is all energy. There was very little variation in those top lists, and all the supporting characters, X-Babies, Beast the Brute, are negate characters. You have a really good defensive character in Spider-Woman, Mr. Fantastic as well, good defensive choice, but with an 8. But all these 3 here just being energy is not something that I liked, but that's pretty much what we saw with this tournament. Overall, amongst all 43 decks, 33% of the characters were characters whose highest stat was energy. That blows everything else away. As you can see, the closest was 19.77, and that's what I call the unaffiliated characters. Those are characters that had 2 or more stats that had the same value. So you see that's at 20%, already a big drop, and then we have 14 to 17% for the other ones. So just not nearly the representation that energy had. I'm actually kind of surprised though that fighting, strength, and intelligence were so evenly represented. You know, we had 27 characters, 29 characters, 25. I know that this unaffiliated row could mess with that, but I didn't want to break it up anymore than I already did. And even though energy was really well represented, they didn't actually have nearly as many unique characters as the other sets. We had 17 unique energy characters, but then 16 unique fighting characters, with the unaffiliated close behind with 14 and the others at 11. So a much more narrow spread. But it was cool to see combat or fighting actually show up on here as well. Kind of makes sense to me, I think, because right now in modern, combat is king, and I think some people are trying to see if they can break that into legacy format too. All right, so let's take a look at this one other thing. I've got this sorted out by legacy and by LRG, and you can see in the legacy only, there's a ton more of energy and combat, so much higher representation than the overall, which means that it makes sense that LRG had a lot of the brute force and intelligent characters to help balance that out. So I thought it was interesting that most of the intelligence characters that we saw actually came from LRG. I see 11 from LRG versus 14 from Legacy, despite having much higher numbers of Legacy characters. I think the Moriartys and the other intelligence characters might be on the rise. The other cool thing to see with the LRG characters is that the range was much tighter. Yeah, we had energy and intelligence as the two primary stats, but there were still some combat characters, and strength was pretty well represented too. So this spread from the high to the low is much more narrow than the 33% down to 14 on Legacy. So I hope that continues to balance out, because it's really a tribute to how awesome the Lazarus Rising guys made this first ERB set, because people want to play all the characters in it, so we got a good spread. So great job, guys. Alright, so let's take a look at what characters we actually saw. Now, I have no idea what's good in Legacy whatsoever. I barely know what's good in Modern. So this is going to be pretty much my first take on some of these Marvel characters, and kind of my reactions to what I'm actually surprised about seeing. So I think the first take that I've got is about Spider-Woman. Now, I've heard that she's one of the most popular ones, and this data shows it. She's got great defensive specials. Some of that can be played from reserve, so I'm not surprised at all to see her up there. But moving on, Beast the Brute, I knew that that was going to be something that I'd see a ton of. Everyone wants those negates, and Beast the Brute's one of the best. A couple things that I'm really happy to see Carnage in here. Love that character card. I just bought that one not too long ago and want to include him in a deck. That +5 to venture, if you kill him, makes him, I think, kind of a target you want to avoid, just like you would with Scarlet Witch. So we'll see how that deck actually plays. I haven't had a chance to play test it yet. Doc Ock, this is actually one of my first decks that I made. Coming back into this has got this guy. Cool to see him out there. 7 intellect, got a lot of avoids. It's a good character, but haven't seen a lot of these old villains around much, so I hope that changes. Doppelganger, I'm surprised to see a Spider-Man clone. From what I've heard, people don't like Spider-Man specials. I know there's Web-Headed Wizard or something along those lines where you can get cards from your deck or the power pack or something. So I'm wondering if that's what he was being played for in these 3 different decks. Mr. Fantastic, another card that I think is really cool. I've actually got a deck idea that I've written up that involves him. I just haven't made it yet because that 4-stat card is like 50, 60, 70 bucks. So I probably want to play test that before dropping some big money on a card. I'm not surprised, another one of those few reserve characters. One of my favorite things that LRG is doing with this was just making so many viable reserve characters, and I didn't even realize that that was something that wasn't a part of the original sets. So awesome decision in giving us essentially a 4th character to play with. Alright, and then there we go. Wolverine, my favorite comic book hero. I love that he's got a appearance in a deck and not just a cameo. Alright, so DC, man, DC did not have a very strong showing. Pretty much the only thing that's actually up here, Wonder Woman, she was a part of a couple of Joan of Arc decks, and I think is phenomenal for it. She's got the combat stat, she's got some specials, she's got a lot of defense. I'm not surprised we saw 2 copies from the 3 Joan decks that were out there. And then Image, the 11 spawns. There's nothing more to say about that. I just hope that that meta breaks and we start seeing less decks made by 1 or 2 different characters. It's a lot more fun when there's variety. And then the LRG characters. I mean, I love Cthulhu. I've got so many different decks with him. Makes for a great reserve front line. Cool that he showed up a few different times. This I really like to see. Mina Harker and Morgan Le Fay. There's only like 5 or 6 different negate options in the Legacy game, so it's cool to see that these 2 are showing up. I mean, the Mummy's got 3 copies here as well, so a lot of modern negators, which is amazing. Van Helsing, really cool character here. It's got some of those Legacy style attacks, kind of a powerhouse, so I'm not surprised seeing him come up. And then Big Man Zeus, I'm actually surprised at that. I'm continually surprised that he was not in the Seattle Regional much at all, because his 9s are just crazy in Modern. And I would think that they're more easy to avoid in Legacy because of all those avoid 9s or lesses. But, I mean, we still saw 6 of them, so that's still pretty cool. And then half of Leoro. Unfortunately, the half that I don't really like, so maybe I'll have to take a look and see if there's a way to get Leonidas into one of these. But anyway, let's move on from that. Let's take a look at Battlesites. So fun fact, this is kind of how I actually figured out what the difference between Battlesites locations and home bases are. The most played of the Battlesites, we've got the Outback with Wolverine, Jubilee, and the rest of the gang there played 9 times. There were 8 any character decks, so about 20% or so. And then Onslaught Citadel was the 3rd place battle site. For mission sets, here's the data there. We have The Crossing was the number 1. And then Shattered Image and Fatal Attractions. So of those, I know The Crossing sacrifices characters, so that's definitely a mechanic that seems to be really popular. Last but not least, our most played home bases. Team Overpower was by and far the top of the list. I think just people want that extra venture. Round table. Like you saw, there was only 8 any character decks, so most of those ran a round table. And then kind of trailing pretty far behind was Asclepion with 4. Alright, and before we go, I want to take you through the top 8 decks from the OP Cup. Now, I have no idea who placed 4th place through 8th place. They've all just got this top 8 pin on their graphic, so these are not in any particular order. I'll just be kind of sharing my thoughts with what I thought of these decks. So, very first thing that comes up with me, Beast the Brute. We saw how many copies of those that there were, so even though this is not a brute force deck, I'm kind of surprised to see him come up still. I almost would think that the intelligence would synergize a little bit better, but I mean, it made it to the top 8, so Zach was doing something right. And then in this one here, we see Scarlet Witch. Remember, that's the 2nd most common character showing up. So she's routinely thought of as the absolute best character in all of Overpower. I'm not surprised that she made it this far. Another one here, another Beast the Brute. with Heroes for Hire. Now that's a duo that I've heard a lot about as well. That's like the strength brute force team right there. But we've got Van Helsing, another of the cool LRG characters who's joining the roster with Silver Sable in reserve. So definitely a splash of combat. I think that might be a little bit different than the past, but you got me. Here, Beast the Brute again, but we got some split 8s. So Zoro is making headway in the modern format and making headway in Legacy. So good on him. I definitely like to see that Spartan training ground though. That is one of my favorites, home bases and favorite kind of mechanics in the game. So cool for making it in the top 8, because that is literally the only Spartan training ground in the entire 43 decks. Alright, the final of the top 8 decks here. This is really cool because it's a combat deck, which, from what I understand, does not make it very far in the Legacy format very often. So this is Legacy team, all combat characters, still representing and showing that combat is a good stat. Okay, and so for number 3, here's that Spawn, Starjammer, Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange deck. I think that's called a Cadillac in Legacy. This is like the go-to deck that everyone's been playing for 20 years with just a couple tweaks. So, you know, you've had 20 years or so to play that really well. Clearly is able to fight new challengers as well. Number 2 deck, I've got another Beast the Brute, Heroes for Hire. A little bit disappointed to see those other brute force decks not make their way up. But, you know, at least this one's got a little bit different style. And then finally, the winning deck, Joan of Arc, Zealot, Wonder Woman, and Silver Sable. This is so cool that there's an LRG character that's joined the winner's circle. I think King Arthur did in the very first Western shootout of the year. But this is just such an awesome deck. I love Joan of Arc. She's my favorite intelligence character from the new set. And I think she's just missing a few people to join her team in the modern format. So I'm sure that's going to change once the second set comes out, but this is absolutely perfect, bringing in this great female cast from all the old sets to be able to benefit from that incredible EFL card. So congratulations, Jonathan. Made a great deck. Again, thank you, Zach, for putting all these deck lists together. It's been really fun to look at what's actually out there and what's being played. And I hope that I see you guys in another video here soon. So, venture well, guys.